Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Objective Health. I am Doug, and with me today is my co host Erica. And today we are going to be talking about, again, the coronavirus. It seems like it's pretty much all we talk about now. But specifically, the stuff that's going around about the connection between 5G and the coronavirus. And that some people are spreading around this idea that 5G is actually causing the coronavirus in some way or affecting it in some way. So, because we were going to be doing this topic, we decided we'd go back to our favorite tech guy, Scottie from Scottie's Tech.Info, to fill us in on some of the scoop on that. So, welcome, Scottie.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yeah. And incidentally, for all our viewers, if anybody didn't catch our last episode with Scottie, it was very good, very worth watching. He really laid out all the stuff about 5G, what they're not telling you, what they don't want you to know. And a really excellent show. So we thought, as long as we're going to be talking about 5G and its connection with this coronavirus, you're the guy to talk to, basically.
Well, all right then. I guess that's good.
So maybe we could start out, like you did a video on your own channel, Scottie's Tech.Info, which everybody should check out, a couple of weeks back, about not even, I guess, about a week ago.
About 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. That was basically debunking the idea that 5G was actually causing coronavirus in some way. So maybe you can give us like a little recap of what you were kind of talking about in that video.
Sure. So back in July of 2018, I think it was, I made a video called 5G is just the tip of the iceberg. And the whole reason I made that video was because everyone back then, this was, almost 2 years ago, they were talking about 5G and it kept coming up in the news. And so I decided to make that video because basically my point was that, we have these 5G systems coming in, and yes, they're using higher frequencies. But back at that time, it was kind of shocking to me to see that everyone was talking about 5G and how horrible it was, while kind of ignoring the elephant in the room, which is that, we have 2G and 3G and 4G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, basically. In fact, this stuff has been around for years, and everyone's kind of ignoring it, And one of the points I made in that video was, like, for example, Wi-Fi was introduced for sale in like 2001, publicly available. It didn't catch on until, say, like 2008, 2009, let's say. So like kids right now who are like 10, 11 years old, they're the first generation that's actually been exposed to this stuff, possibly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether they're at home, in school, going to the park, even like everywhere. They're saturated by this stuff. And of course, smartphones, became popular not that long ago, actually. So it's, I was kind of saying, well, a lot of these things have been around for a while, but it's only in recent years where we're really sort of bombarded by it from all angles all the time. Most people are anyway. So I made that video. And like I said, that was in July of 2018. And I noticed a few weeks ago that suddenly it started getting a whole bunch of views again. And I kind of went like, we're in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic thing, or not pandemic, however you want to look at it. And it's like, well, what does 5G have to do with this? And then I started seeing these news stories about it. And what actually prompted me to make that video, 5G or virus, the data speaks for itself. That's what it was called. And I made it purely because I read some news articles about how people who were in countries who were in lockdown were actually leaving their homes to go find 5G towers and set them on fire.
Yeah.
And then I was reading other stuff, and they're saying, like, 5G can, some of the stuff was like, some of the things are kind of interesting to me. Like, when you have 5G, it's a range of frequencies. So there'll be 5G at 3 gigahertz, for example, for rural areas. Some will be at 6 gigahertz. The millimeter wave stuff, it can be 20, well, millimeter wave is like 30 to 300 gigahertz, but we'll say, 27 gigahertz is pretty close. So, some 5G systems with the steerable beams and all this stuff and super high speeds, some will be like 27 gigahertz, some 30 something, up to like 60 gigahertz that I've heard about. So then everyone started saying, well, 60 gigahertz is like the frequency at which oxygen molecules resonate and blah, blah, blah. And I kind of read up a little bit on, more on what all these people were saying. And I thought like, well, let me just do a quick little comparison here, because I knew that 5G is not super widespread. Like, it's in certain areas it is. But when you look at maps of the actual deployments of 5G, it cannot account for coronavirus, basically. And specifically, I was kind of responding to these people who were saying that there is no virus at all, and it's purely just 5G systems. So I just kind of took an Ookla map. It's speedtest.net/Ookla, something like that. There's a map that shows 5G deployments. And of course, it doesn't include all the 5G deployments. I also didn't include the test deployments. And a test deployment, by the way, is like some people are saying, oh, that means that the whole city is saturated in 5G. In some cases, it might mean that a large part of the city is already being saturated in it. In other cases, it means that there are literally like 3 short streets in the entire city where they put like one or a few antennas up, and like that's it. So, when I looked at that, I was like, well, okay, let's go for like actual deployments, like actual commercial availability of 5G, because, if you have some test systems here and there, sure, it might be hitting people, but I mean, come on, it's not like, the whole population is covered by it. So I just overlaid, the official Johns Hopkins COVID maps with the kind of official, 5G map, or one of them anyway. And it was pretty clear that there wasn't a correlation in many countries where there were many COVID-19 cases or supposed COVID-19 cases. There's no 5G to speak of, or there are a few test installations here and there. But basically, it was just kind of a simple way to point out that, look, don't be blaming this on 5G. So I got a lot of backlash for that, because, of course, there are many people saying all sorts of interesting things about 5G. And one of the concluding points in my video that I made was simply that it's like, look, you want to blame everything on 5G, but you're not even thinking about 4G. I mean, 4G is everywhere. Wi-Fi is everywhere. Bluetooth is everywhere. People are carrying cell phones all the time. And you've been exposed to that stuff for like, whatever, minimum 10 years, let's say. So, and there are many studies and even prestigious medical journals that many people ignore, showing that, yeah, this stuff might not be so good for us. And in fact, it's doing things like weakening our immune systems. So it just kind of seemed a little bit odd to me that so many people were ignoring what's clearly already widely deployed and focusing on 5G. And I thought, well, it kind of makes sense, because basically you're confronted with, in print newspapers, online, you turn on the TV or you watch your news on the internet, and every mainstream media outlet is, they're telling you this is the most deadly virus in the world. Millions are going to die. And then millions don't die. And then they tell you that, children can't get it. And then they're like, yeah, children can get it actually. And then they tell you, don't leave your home, but yeah, you can leave your home. And then they tell you, no, don't worry, animals can't get it. And then like a week later, you find out that there are like 3 big tigers or cats or something where they've got COVID-19. So it's like, you can kind of understand how in this situation, people in general are gonna sort of freak out, When we freak out, what we tend to do is try to find some semblance of control or normalcy. And so one of the things that I think happens is while we're going, oh my God, we're all going to die, we then try to, sort of reason our way out of it. And what we end up doing is we end up saying, hey, hang on a minute. I read some stuff about 5G. Yeah, 5G is really evil. And so then we blame everything on 5G. And we ignore things like, I don't know, the COVID-19 statistics are a little bit wonky, or there are 2 doctors in California. Probably you've seen that video if you could find one that YouTube doesn't take down instantly, where they're basically saying, look, we understand why they have this lockdown for, New York City, for example, maybe it was necessary, but here in, more rural or non-major cities, let's say, we don't have a lot of cases. We're not getting herd immunity. We're not being properly taking care of people who have like heart disease and strokes and this kind of thing. In the UK, there are stories of people, care homes for the elderly, where they're basically just not taking care of them anymore, kind of leaving them all alone. Their families can't visit them. They're not even getting the drugs that they need, the medications that they need. To say nothing of the very probable harsh economic impact of literally shutting down the entire world for 2 months. That's going to go well. So all these things are happening, and of course, everyone is sort of aware of these things at some level. And so then, in any case, many people just decide to go, well, let's blame it all on 5G. And then, of course, you have to sort of, you kind of have to justify it to yourselves. And so you come up with all sorts of crazy theories. And so that's why I actually made the video. And it was pretty funny because the minute I put the video up, because it was about, it mentions COVID-19, YouTube instantly demonetized it. And of course, I don't make lots of money on my YouTube channel, so that wasn't the end of the world. I requested a review, and they had already informed us, because of the lockdown, you won't get a review for your video for probably like a couple of weeks or something. Well, a few days later, they approved it, and subsequently, over 200,000 people have watched it.
Wow, that's great.
But the reason the 200,000 people have watched it was because it is considered okay.
Yeah.
by YouTube, right?
It's debunking.
Because I'm not saying that 5G is causing a virus. I'm saying, well, no, that's ridiculous. Here's some simple data you can look at where obviously it doesn't match up, right? But the kind of hitting point was, the thing that I couldn't say was basically that, we shouldn't be blaming things that aren't to blame. It may not be fun to think about, political motivations and economic concerns. And it might be nice to say, let's save the elderly while we're simultaneously leaving them in nursing homes to
Die.
Basically rot. I mean, how is this okay? How is this actually really helping people and really saving people? And of course, I have personal experience with, doctors and nurses who are working in places where they, some of the countries where, like Spain, where they have not so long ago, it was like, oh my God, Spain is the next hotspot and everyone's going to die. And, I know people working there and they're basically telling me, like, we're not doing anything. There's all these empty hospitals. That doesn't mean that all the hospitals are empty. But again, it's like if you have one area where there's tons and tons of people at a hospital and they're all being hit by this, and a bunch of areas that don't have anybody, well, at what point do you say that the lockdown is a good idea? It's there are more details to consider than just good, bad, and it's it. So my point in making the video in a more a broader sense was to sort of hopefully kind of get people away from the whole it's all 5G, let's just blame that, and kind of thinking a little bit more about some of this other stuff. But of course, you can't really say so much on the YouTube. So hang on a minute. Are you guys going to put this video on YouTube?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's interesting because, I thought of a bunch of things while you were talking there. But one of the things that I noticed is trying to get ready for this show is kind of like, well, what are people actually saying about this? I'm going to go watch some coronavirus 5G videos and see what people are saying. And there's none. All you can find are debunking videos. You can't actually find any of the videos anymore where they're actually saying that, 5G causes, because, YouTube, I guess, freaked out about it and just took all of them down. So I was able to find some like on Vimeo, and I found one on YouTube that was actually like somebody had put it up with Greek subtitles on it. So it had a Greek name. So I guess they didn't find that one. But yeah, I was surprised that considering how much press has been dedicated to debunking the whole thing, it was surprising that you can't actually find the original thing anymore, the original stuff. I mean, all you really have is the evidence of people like burning down 5G mast towers and things like that.
Yeah, which that doesn't really do their cause any favors. I mean,
No.
why would you have a whole bunch of videos debunking it when they're? I mean, obviously everyone knows about it because they're searching, you know. So, but the other thing is that I totally forgot, but it was a good point.
No worries. But yeah, is there? Sorry. I was just going to say, is there, like, I can kind of on the one hand understand why people are freaking out about 5G specifically. Like, you know, your point that, you know, they're ignoring all these, the previous generations of communication, and are just focusing on this 5G thing. But at the same time, I mean, isn't 5G, it is kind of like a quantum leap in what is being done with this technology, is it not? Like, I know you went into this in the kind of the past interview that we did with you, where we were talking about what it was like, kind of specifically about 5G that was different from the previous generations. And it does seem like it's different enough that people could kind of be like, well, you know, this other stuff is bad, but 5G is so much worse that maybe it is actually causing these kinds of reactions.
Yeah, and actually, your question there reminded me of what I was going to say. So first, let me say that.
Yeah.
That, you know, you have all these people saying these things about 5G that, as far as I know, are like completely wrong. And it's kind of like the usual thing where you get a bunch of people expressing valid concerns about 5G. Hopefully, as I do, you know, I mean, I find studies by doctors, physicists, even, you know, they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying that, like, millimeter wave frequencies, they penetrate the skin. These sweat ducts in your skin act as like helical antennae and everything, and this could cause problems. They're talking about, like, you know, DNA damage also at non-millimeter wave frequencies. There are many studies in kind of, like, as I said, like prestigious medical journals like The Lancet or whatever. We're not talking about like non-peer reviewed, like, crap studies or something. Obviously, some of them are. They're maybe in less popular, less widely accepted or less renowned journals, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the study itself was garbage. So, you know, you have to read the study and then go, okay, well, you know, is this peer reviewed? Have people repeated the experiment? In many cases they have, you know, blah, blah, blah. So you have this whole kind of this movement where, you know, people are actually concerned about 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. And then you have this situation with COVID-19 where suddenly everyone's saying, yeah, there is no virus, it's 5G, blah, blah, blah. And that's not really doing, you know, all of us who are sort of, you know, it's not doing any favors to those of us who are trying to work to sort of make people aware of these potential pitfalls of all these wireless technologies. And it makes it easier so that, say, like, the next time I make a video about 5G and I'm actually quoting studies, like new studies that might come out, and going, you know, basically just asking the question, saying, you know, I don't have all the answers. I'm not sure myself. But when I read this study, I went, holy crap, that sounds pretty bad. We need to do more research on this stuff. We need, like, you know, a proper study, big, you know, long term. And immediately people can just say, yeah, but you remember the 5G and the COVID? Yeah, you people you're all just conspiracy theorists, and you're the ones who are saying that we should burn down all the towers. And suddenly, like, the entire movement, so to speak, is immediately debunked, simply because some people were trying to kind of rationalize away a virus because it's a really stressful situation that raises all kinds of its own questions, as I mentioned earlier. And in order to sort of deal with all that, they kind of just package it all up and say, 5G, there you go, you know, case closed. And that doesn't do any favors to those of us who are, you know, trying to make people a little bit more aware, and who are basically calling for, you know, less rushing to market with new technologies because we want to make money, and more actual, you know, safety studies and that sort of thing. But not just studies, because there are many of those, but more like more acknowledgement of those studies and more research into how to make existing systems better and safer, which I don't think is impossible. I think it's probably fairly easy if we would just invest the resources in doing that. So Okay, that's what I wanted to say. What was your question now?
Well, I think you kind of answered it. I was just basically saying that I think that there is enough of a difference between 5G and the previous generations that would make people sit up and take notice and actually make that connection. I guess I was more going off of your point that all these people who are freaking out about 5G that is causing coronavirus are ignoring all the previous electromagnetic stuff that we're saturated with. And I was just saying that I think, with the differences in 5G, I can maybe kind of understand why they might do that, if that makes sense.
I mean, there are differences. I mean, there are rather dramatic differences. I talked a little bit earlier about like they're going to be using usually higher frequencies, not in all cases. So like in some cases, current 4G systems, sometimes it's like, 1.7, 1.8, 1.9 gigahertz. In some countries, they use 2.4 gigahertz, which is the same frequency as certain flavors of Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. 5G, in some cases, will use those same frequencies. That will be a slower flavor. Then the type of sort of the modulation scheme they're using, well, that's going to be a little bit different. So, and the studies that I've quoted in my earlier YouTube videos, they talk about how it's the pulse nature of these digital signals that is potentially bad for our health. So, okay, we're going to have 5G and it's a different type of pulsing, basically, to boil it down. So what effect is that going to have? Well, we have to find out, or at least we should find out. Then on top of that, you have the higher, like the millimeter wave bands where you get up to 30, 60 gigahertz. These are much higher frequencies than have been widely deployed to date, like on a massive scale. Yes, the military has been using some of these higher frequencies for various things. Yes, including actually 95 gigahertz for their active denial system, where it makes it feel like your skin is on fire, and that's actually something people were talking about is like, oh, they're going to use the 5G system for like death rays. Well, that's actually complicated because, first of all, it's 95 gigahertz, and the highest frequency that I'm aware of is somewhere around 60 gigahertz for 5G millimeter waves. And yes, the new 5G systems, some of them anyway, are going to have highly steerable beams. And the reason for that is that at the higher frequencies, basically the radio waves propagate differently. So in order to maintain a connection and in order to possibly have like MIMO and like multiple input, multiple output, basically it's just you have two pencil beams that are shooting from the tower to your handset. And look, you've got two channels instead of one. It's also kind of for tracking individual phones. So to avoid interference and increase speed for everyone, like this is why they're doing this. And it's also true that power levels for 5G towers are allowed to be dramatically higher. But then even the power level thing is hairy because it's, I forget the term now. I talked about it in one of my videos, and it's like a isotropic gradient. It's some highly technical term where basically it means that it's the total power that the tower is radiating if you took all the individual antennas and added the power level of their transmitters all together, and if it was radiating in like kind of like a sphere out from the tower, something like that, where it's it's useful to compare power levels kind of in a general sense. But so when we say like, 5G is going to transmit at higher power levels, it is. And actually it's not going to transmit in like wide beams, but in very narrow beams much of the time. So wait, doesn't that mean that that's kind of like a death ray? Well, yeah, kind of. And yeah, that actually should be concerning. But then when you're talking about like the active denial system, it's not 60 gigahertz, it's 95 gigahertz. And, at a specific frequency, it has specific effects on different structures in the body. So I don't know that 60 gigahertz will have the same effect. Maybe it will have effects on like oxygen, for example. Right. We'll find out. Right. But, is it going to be able to be used as like death rays? Well, even though the power levels are higher, as far as I know, no, it's not high enough to actually do something like that. And then, of course, people will argue, right, but if you have like 25G towers and they're each shooting a pencil beam, they could all focus on you and like fry your brain or something. And like, I don't know, I mean, these are kind of things that You have to really know the nitty gritty details of how these 5G systems are working. They're not even, we'll see. But generally speaking, as far as I'm aware, the power levels required to do something like an active denial thing are way, way, way lower. Even though 5G is higher than 4G, it's like different kettle of fish, which means, but even that gets complicated because there was an article I read where it's from ages ago where they were using, I think it was microwave frequency signals, and they could actually focus, if you focused it on a beam and modulated it in just the right way, you could actually make the bones in someone's ear resonate and project voices into their head. And of course, you think that's like totally crazy. And yet there was this paper, a declassified document that talked about exactly that. So you go, well, could you do something like that with it? Well, sure. Well, okay, so is the government going to beam voices into our heads? Well, I don't know. There are certain things that are possible that I can think about. I mean, if you have 60 gigahertz beams that are sweepable or something, could you track people's movements better, not just by the emissions from their smartphone, but could you actually use it almost like radar? Well, if you could precisely control it and kind of take over the whole system, well, I don't see why you couldn't if you're smart enough and you have a big enough budget. So a lot of these ideas, I don't think they're totally crazy, but it's the kind of thing where, to me, it's like, is that really the thing you should be concerned about when you have all these other things like, studies coming out talking about, millimeter waves and their effects in the body. And it's not just one doctor, it's like across the board, like all kinds of different, professions and levels of expertise. And they're all kind of saying, yeah, this is concerning to me. And that's on top of what we already know about, say 3G, 4G and Wi-Fi. So it's kind of, it's kind of a pickle.
Yeah, definitely.
It's almost like a constant mudding of the waters, which we've talked about in the past on the show, like just inundating people with these ideas and then kind of running with it. And like you said, Scottie, not focusing on all the studies that have already been done about wireless technology in general and trying to do your part, getting an Ethernet, not having your phone on all the time, using a landline, all these things, and just going into the fear-mongering, the scariness, and and then to throw the coronavirus in there too, and just let people run with it almost to see how people respond. You know what I mean? As a kind of a test. I noticed the same thing was kind of happening with chemtrails, right? Like, oh, the immune system's being broken down. This is, they're spraying the chemtrails, and it's like, oh no, that's when you're like, okay, just turn off the TV or the computer and walk away for a minute and come back. And you know what I mean? So I'm so glad you're on here because for someone like me, I don't have a lot of technical information at all. And you help explain it in such a way that, is understandable, and that to not freak out and sky is falling and that 5G radar is pointed right at me and it's going to give me the COVID-19 if I don't behave.
Well, I actually, like I said in my 5G or virus video, I said, I actually kind of freaked out about the virus, because one day it's like, la, 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 you're just kind of skipping along. You're like a Smurf or something. And suddenly it's like, oh my God, we're shutting down the planet because there's a deadly virus and everyone's going to die. And it's like, well, how could you not freak out? It's like, but then just like the fear mongering that's going on. And like, again, I know people personally on kind of both sides of the equation. I know people personally who are healthcare workers. They are health heroes. They're taking care of COVID patients, literally. And they're like utterly terrified. And they're not actually really paying any attention to, like, for example, the statistics, the I think one of the recent ones they came across was like Australia has something like 160,000 people a year die, and only 83 have died with COVID-19. And they're kind of locking down the whole country and blah, blah, blah. And you're going, well, hang on a minute, like more people die in your country every year. Now, of course, the sort of the mainstream health hero side of these people I know would argue that you're right, but it's the lockdown that prevented that. Well, then you can look at other countries like Sweden who didn't have a lockdown, and they're not having, you have to actually dig into it. And when you're a person in that situation where you're literally terrified for your life because you're trying to help people who have this virus and, blah, 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 like you can kind of understand how, they're kind of allowed to freak out, right? And then on the other side of the equation, I know people personally who are kind of on the other, the whole, like, all of our hospitals are empty and my country completely stopped testing anyone. And the tests they were using, they're not even like antibody tests. They could detect any number of different coronaviruses. And so it's not even accurate. And why is the whole country locked down? We're destroying the economy for nothing. The elderly people are being left to fend for themselves. It's horrible, heart disease, stroke. And so they're kind of also freaking out, but for a different reason. And like I said, like, I also kind of wigged out a bit but you have to kind of stop and go, right, okay, I'm still here, I'm still alive. What's actually going on here, and look at, numbers, like look at statistics and look at, try to get like the big picture. And part of that is like, 5G is potentially way worse than 4G. How much worse? Well, like I said, that's hard to say because we can't even really say for sure what Wi-Fi and 3G and 4G are going to do, because the kids who've been subjected to it 24/7, they're only like 10 or 11 years old right now. So are we going to see, I don't want to see that like 8 years down the road, suddenly there's this preponderance of like crazy illnesses or something. And, and I don't even have kids. So I'm, so is 5G worse? Like, well, it has the potential to be, as far as I can tell, as far as other people who are smarter than me who are doing studies. But like, I mean, I myself am not an expert in 5G or even telecommunications. Like, okay, I did my degree in it and I understand this stuff a lot better than most people. But to be a real expert in something, it's kind of like being like a brain surgeon. You really have to understand all the nitty gritty details. And with wireless systems like 5G, that ain't easy to do, because you have people who design sort of the box of equipment that goes to the tower. And then you have people whose entire specialty is understanding radio waves and how they propagate. You have people whose entire specialty is basically designing antennas. And so it's, in a sense, information is compartmentalized, but to really fully understand it, you kind of need doctors in there and physicists in there. And, normally we just have, companies saying, hey, we want to sell this technology. And the FCC is just kind of like, waving their hands and going, yeah, it's great. It's wonderful. Have you done any studies? No. Okay, whatever. Just sell it and whatever. And then we'll
find out later. We'll find out later what happens.
Yeah. And it's like, well, but that's crazy. So anyway, I don't really consider myself an expert in these things, but I consider myself someone who hopefully will just sort of kind of keep a cool head and go, all right, look, yes, I'm afraid of this and I'm afraid of that, but I'm going to try to look at things as objectively as I can and share information. And that's why in most of my videos, I'm not really making any hard and fast conclusions. I'm trying to get people to ask questions, because very often people post comments and they say, hey, did you hear about this study, or did you read this article? And I'll go, oh, wow, I didn't know that, and it's kind of like a community thing where, we're all sort of sharing information. And, to me, that's kind of nifty. And as for, people freaking out and fear mongering, I just had a comment actually this morning. Somebody watched my 5G is just the tip of the iceberg video, the one I published 2 years ago, and said, like, just a curt little comment that, you're ridiculous, so you're just fear mongering and blah, blah, blah. And, I had to reply. I couldn't help myself. I had to reply. And I said, have you actually watched the news lately? Here I am just saying, like, look, there are scientific studies by doctors and physicists and in multiple countries and, thousands of studies, and they're all looking at different aspects of our current wireless technologies and our future wireless technologies and saying, look, this is concerning to me. It has this effect, that effect. It might make men sterile. It might affect your DNA. It might do this. It might do that. And we're in the middle of a freaking pandemic, and nobody can agree on where the virus came from or how it came into being and blah blah blah. And you're going, well, yeah, that's certainly maybe that wireless stuff that we've been exposed to for years already. Maybe it's weakening the immune systems of people. Maybe only certain people. Maybe not all people. But then why? Why those people and not these people, I mean, there are lots of questions, and all I'm trying to do is basically ask questions and just say, what's the answer? I have these questions and this concerns me, and maybe it should concern you too. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, but then, I can't say for sure that you can't use, 5G as a death ray. I suppose if you got all the antennas in a city and you focus them all into one little tight beam, you might be able to boil someone's brain or something. But it would probably require a lot of antennas, and people would be pissed off because they don't have their super fast 5G download speeds.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you imagine if they took over all the 5G antennas in New York to fry someone's brain, and how many people would be pissed off because they can't use WhatsApp or TikTok or whatever the kids these days use,
Snapchat
and Instagram, and they wouldn't be able to post selfies. There'd be a revolution,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I guess that's my question is why do we even need 5G? I don't know about you guys, but I can stream this video and I can, listen to my music and watch my Netflix. And why the push to keep going further and further? Or if you don't know, I'm just asking a question.
Well, that's actually a good question because of the Internet of Things, which is basically sales and marketing. Well, I would say that in a large city, of course, you have to have a lot of bandwidth for a lot of users. And of course, the more users you have, which is going up all the time, and the more content they're consuming, the more bandwidth you need to have, which means you need to keep installing more and more systems. And so, of course, everyone's always looking for something better and faster. But to actually decide on a system like 5G and go, right, we're going to install 200 times as many antennas everywhere, which obviously costs a lot of money. And they're obviously going to pass that cost on to the consumer somehow. And you have a shrinking middle class, an economy that's not doing so well. Smartphone sales are not what they used to be, for sure. Is everybody going to run out and buy a brand new 5G phone? Probably not. Definitely not now. So where did this push come from? And as far as I can tell, it's basically because of this idea of the Internet of Things, where we're going to have everything is internet connected. Like your carton of eggs, internet connected. your washing machine, internet connected. The pair of socks you're wearing, internet connected. It's all going to happen through the 5G. And it's wait, why do I need to have internet connected socks? Did anyone ask me if I wanted internet connected? Most people, in fact, all people I've talked to about this, they actually tell me what is this Internet of Things? They don't even know. And yet, every tech article on every tech website that I read, they're talking about it as if everyone knows that this is the wonderful future and everything's going to be internet connected. It'll all be wireless and everything. If you have to water flowers in your yard, each little sprinkler that you hook up, it's not just going to be a sprinkler anymore. You're going to hook it up to the garden hose. It's going to have a little battery in it and a wireless transmitter and moisture sensors. And it's going to detect the moisture of your yard and automatically water better and wirelessly connect to everything. And it's so it's does Google or Amazon, do they want to know how much water I'm using now? Or how is that useful in terms of marketing data? It's even beyond the whole thing where you've got your smartphone sitting on the table at dinner and you talk about, you need a new pair of socks. And when you get home, you hop on your laptop and you surf and it's showing you sock advertisements. This is like the Internet of Things is like way beyond that. It's not just smart speakers and smart cameras and that kind of thing. It's like everything's going to be internet connected.
Yeah.
And it's talked about as if it's this wonderful thing, like it's going to create like a utopia. And I don't really know who came up with that idea and why they thought it was good, but that's what actually seems to be driving the 5G thing. In addition to, people in big cities want more bandwidth, for example. But the big thing seems to be the whole Internet of Things. Mm-hmm. And it's like an utter mystery to me who came up with that idea and why they're pushing it so hard. I mean, obviously they want to sell more stuff, but I don't know anyone who wants to buy it. And I don't know many people who have the money to buy all that stuff. So from that perspective, it is kind of interesting. The other thing is that, 5G is going to roll out very slowly. I mean, I live in a rural area in southwestern France, and they said, you guys might get 5G like 3 or 4 years from now. Well, we were like the last place on planet Earth to get 4G because it's like farmers everywhere, and plus they're running fiber all over the country, including to where I live, which is utterly insane. And so we're going to have like high-speed fiber internet, and it's like, well, okay, that's pretty good, right? Who's going to want like, do farmers want 5G enabled smartphones? No, they just want to like, call the family or, whatever, say, oh, the sprinkler's broken, or, I mean, it's not,
well, it's funny you say that, Scottie, because I was reading somewhere, I think it was Info, and they were talking about 5G being used in agriculture, just what you were saying, like measuring water level, soil, condensation, parasites. And basically, I'm wondering if it's just to eventually replace the hands-on workforce of people like in the farm, and they showed a picture of a 5G meter in the middle of a crop, and the farmer doesn't even need to go out there anymore because all the data is constantly being sent back to his smartphone, like you were saying. So the observation part of being a farmer and learning how to tell what's going on every day is basically replaced by the technology.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I did actually read an article about exactly that, and I thought, oh, well, that's kind of curious. My question is, how many farmers would want that sort of thing? How many would actually pay for it? I mean, part of being a farmer is you're a farmer, man. You go out there and you walk your land and you put your hand in the soil, and it's like, I mean, you have like almost like a, it's the kind of thing where like you scoop your hand in the dirt and you sniff it, and exactly like the last time it rained, and the moisture of the soil is just perfect. It's you can really be, it's kind of almost like an art form, like growing food and crops and that sort of thing. So to take all that and basically flush it down the toilet in favor of sensors, I could see that in, say, commercial farming, which of course in many places commercial farming is crushing the little guy, which is unfortunate. So for commercial farming, sure, but I don't really know any farmers who would be able for that, especially the cost involved. Maybe, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, something you said earlier, Scottie, when you were talking about that comment that was on your video and was basically calling you a quack, more or less, about the whole 5G thing. I think that maybe the reason that you're seeing that now is that it's kind of like, if it was done on purpose, I don't know if it was done on purpose that this whole 5G coronavirus thing came up as a way of kind of debunking, like we were talking about earlier, a way of kind of debunking the whole concern about 5G, more or less. But I think the fact that you're getting, 2 years after you did a video, you're getting a comment like that is showing just how polarizing it's starting to get already, that it's actually kind of working, that now, anybody who is bringing up any kind of concern about about 5G is going to be grouped in with the quacks who were saying it caused coronavirus. Like I'm already starting to see that kind of stuff, like, debunking articles about how 5G is completely safe. It kind of, they just dismiss any concern whatsoever about it. And the whole hooking up with the coronavirus thing, that, oh yeah, it causes coronavirus, it just makes it all the more easy for those people to be believed that it is absolutely 100% safe. Anyone who says otherwise is a kook, is crazy. I think that's very unfortunate. It's effective mind programming in a sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of doubly effective because it's, you're in the middle of this coronavirus thing, and it's not only is it making people sort of think that anyone who raises any concerns about 5G is a lunatic, but you have that aspect, and then you have the other aspect where for those people who basically buy into like 5G is the cause of everything, including, like the death of Jesus and, this, all that kind of stuff. Then it's like, it's taking them and kind of like derailing them off in this direction and kind of preventing them from asking any more reasonable questions about what's actually going on, outside their front door.
Yeah.
So it kind of serves multiple purposes. And yeah, that's why I decided to make that video. And I made that 5G or virus one, and I was like, they're just going to take it down right away. And I was surprised they left it up. And then I understood why they left it up. And they actually remonetized it, which I suppose was nice. And, but it's like most of the comments on there are people telling me that I'm crazy and saying like, no, really, you need to look into this more. And it's all about oxygen and blah, blah, blah. And like I said before, like, maybe there is some effect there. What is that effect? Like, I get concerned about wireless stuff when I read studies about it. And so like, show me a study that talks about that aspect of it. And, I'm not going to, many people consider me to be crazy because they say, oh, how can you say, they say things like, well, but power levels matter. And of course, power levels do matter. But then one of the studies I quoted in one of my videos says that power levels 1,000 times lower than like a Bluetooth wireless mouse, 1,000 times weaker, have health effects. That's such an infinitesimally small power level that it's basically saying that the laws of physics as we understand them in terms of like electromagnetic fields, like radio waves, there's something we don't understand there because it's such a tiny, tiny power level. It's like, how could that have any effect on the body? And yet there it was in this study. And so then I'm like curious, I'm going, well, hey, that's interesting. But, most people are going like, don't question the laws of physics. And I'm like, yeah, question the laws of physics. That's how we learn things. That's how we progress, and that just kind of boils down to, it's comfortable to believe what the authorities tell us and blah, blah, blah. And I'm more of kind of like a free thinker, I guess, like my whole thing is like, get bits of data and think about it and, ask questions and, try to find some answer. And I'm perfectly happy to, maybe all the studies I've quoted in my videos, like maybe there's more information out there that I'll come across eventually that shows it's perfectly safe. I don't think so because there's a doctor in the UK, I can't remember her name now, Dr. Erica something or other. She had a YouTube video. I put it on my Facebook page, my Scottie's Tech.Info Facebook page, and like the thing was like over an hour long, and she just quoted study after study after study that they did showing all kinds of effects. And it's interesting because it doesn't affect everyone. And that's a common thing is people say, I've had Wi-Fi forever. I carry my smartphone like duct taped to my head and I'm perfectly healthy. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe you are because maybe you're like genetically superior or something. Maybe you have a super good diet or there's something about your lifestyle that makes you stronger and more immune. Maybe people who swear that every time they're around Wi-Fi, they have tinnitus or something. There were studies talking about how that is a definite physical effect, that tinnitus can be caused by it. And like one woman wrote to me and said, oh my God, thank you. I'm so happy to actually read that because everyone always tells me I'm crazy, then someone else will come along and say, no, you're crazy old bag, because the same thing doesn't happen to me. And it's like, well, the same thing doesn't, it's complicated, man. And it's only by asking questions that we're going to actually get to the core of anything. And the last thing, especially now, that we want to do is basically fight. I mean, I post things on like my personal Facebook page where I'm kind of just asking questions, like statistics, like Australia or these California doctors, just saying, like, look at the numbers here. Look at the COVID deaths with COVID versus flu deaths in, where I live, for example. And it's like, there's no comparison. So you're going, but then, and there's just this huge divide now, because it's like, no, you're evil. You want everyone to die. And I'm like, no, I don't want everybody to die. And that just kind of splits everybody apart. And then you've got the 5G thing, and it's like, no, 5G death rays, and like, no, 5G is good. And that splits people apart. And no one can actually, it's kind of like the whole Republican versus Democrat, and, the Trump crowd versus the anti-Trump crowd, and everything is all just this insane level of division. And I just want to ask questions, man.
Well, we're certainly glad that
is that so wrong?
No.
Were you always that inquisitive child?
Yes, I went to when I was in third grade, I got invited to this, it was called Project Discovery. It was like you go to 4th, 5th, and 6th grade for like gifted children, whatever that means. And so I remember we were on summer vacation, the summer after the year I was in third grade, and I was like freaking out, because I'm like, oh my God, what if everyone there is smarter than me? And I drove my mother completely insane because I asked her, I was like, what is that tree? What kind of tree is that? Why are the leaves green? Why are those leaves not green? What about this? What about that? What about this? And I drove her completely bonkers, because I was like, maybe I was a little nuts. But I think we can say that, yes, I have always asked lots and lots of questions.
Well, I think that's a good thing. Definitely. So I guess if we were going to kind of sum everything up, it's that 5G is bad, but it's not causing the coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 3G and 4G and Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff. Like, how bad is it? Like, do we want to wait another 10 years to find out how really bad it is, or do we want to just pay attention to these studies now and then get everybody together to work together? Oh my God, what a concept. Stop the division, get everybody to work together from various countries, forget about all the political nonsense, and pool all the data and see what you can figure out. And if there's a way to make it safer, make it safer. And before you roll 5G out everywhere, when there are people with valid concerns, published scientific valid concerns, like, stop calling each other names and just kind of get it sorted out. I realize we don't really live in an ideal world, but it's like, is it really that hard to do? It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, but I think it's next to impossible.
Yeah. And until then, people say, what can you do? And I just tell them, like, look, you don't need to be carrying a smartphone around with you all the time. If you are carrying a phone around with you, turn it off. If you live in a place where, every neighbor around you in an apartment complex has Wi-Fi, don't have Wi-Fi yourself. Sure, their Wi-Fi may be coming through the walls, but cumulative exposure has been shown to be bad. And the less cumulative exposure you have, the better off you are. So, people will write to me and say, yeah, but I've got like 3 neighbors and they've got the Wi-Fi going. And I'm like, right, you can't escape that. But you can escape adding your own on top of it and having your smartphone next to your head on the nightstand, transmitting away, downloading, whatever, Instagram or WhatsApp updates all night long. And, you don't need to have an internet-enabled car with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and a high-speed internet connection and, and all that kind of stuff. Then there are other things that you kind of really can't do anything about. There's, if you're surrounded by Wi-Fi transmitters, you can't really do anything about that. But you can minimize in other ways. You can ensure that you have like a good diet. You can ensure that, you're not taking any, pharmaceuticals that you don't absolutely have to take. You can exercise regularly. You can detox. There's all kinds of things you can do for your health to strengthen your body, strengthen your immune system. And, hopefully that will compensate for any exposure that you do have, and then minimize your exposure on top of that. If you can send your kids to a school that doesn't have Wi-Fi, like that's great. Use Ethernet at home, blah, blah, blah. Another thing people talked about in response to my 5G videos was, but it's got to be 5G for COVID-19 because of satellite-based 5G. And that's like, they are planning on launching a total of like 40,000 satellites, and they're going to be in like low Earth orbit or something, a much lower orbit than traditional internet by satellite. But they've only launched to date like 365 satellites or something. All these systems, eventually there's going to be a ton of them up there, and they're going to be, bombarding the whole Earth, right? What effect is that going to have? Probably not a good one. But like, we're not there yet. So you can't really blame, the virus on that, because they're not even up there yet. So some of them are. It's like there's things that you can't do anything about. You can even look into their materials you can use to shield your house if you want to. You can look to, if possible, move to a rural area. I mean, where I live, it's like there's a couple neighbors far away that are in like farming country, and, cell phone signals barely penetrate the walls of the house and everything. And it's like, I kind of live in a wireless, it's like wireless. Well, actually, it's wired Eden. Yeah. Because there's like no wireless to speak of. And, I'm kind of lucky, but I still think about it, and I go like, do I really need to take my phone with me, even if it's a dumb phone? Like, do I really need to have this thing on right now? When you're driving in your car, like again, in France, when you drive, you have to do the hands-free thing. You can't hold the phone up to your ear. So if the car has Bluetooth, it's got to be wirelessly connected, because if somebody's trying to reach you, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's basically exposing you to 2.4 gigahertz inside a metal can, i.e. the car. That's probably not good for you, but sometimes I can't avoid it. So I just try to find other ways to stay healthy and to detox, and, healthy diet, and, stop eating like plastic food and all the sugar and the wheat and all that kind of stuff. And so far it's worked pretty well, but, ultimately, I mean, I could say, well, here I am concerned about all this wireless stuff, and then there's a crazy virus that goes around, and who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So, you try to be healthy in all possible ways. And I think part of that should be minimizing your exposure to wireless technologies, unless it's absolutely necessary, and or until we know for sure how bad it actually is, possibly even for you specifically. And beyond that, like, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? I mean, tomorrow could be something even crazier than a virus and lockdown. And if this lockdown if it doesn't cause some sort of economic chaos, I would be very, very surprised. And there's, food production plants shutting down, and people are talking about food shortages. And I mean, well, if you can't eat, 5G is the least of your worries, man. You also have to kind of keep some perspective about things. It's like, so.
For a moment there, I thought you said you can't eat 5G. Not yet. Also true.
You might be able to with the Internet of Things, because they may have like a piece of broccoli with a 5G transmitter in it, and when you eat it, it like tracks your guts or something.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds handy.
Yummy. Yeah. You'll get a little instant message on your phone saying like, your digestion is disrupted.
Dial 5 for flush.
Yeah. Well,
let's hope we don't get there.
Yeah, let's hope so. I don't want to even see what 6G is going to be like.
Yeah, they're already working on that supposedly. But
oh my God.
It'll take a while for 5G to roll out, and I'm not even convinced it will get to a lot of places, because, like I said, when you shut down the world for 2 months and then you try to restart, restart everyone's jobs and making money, and so many people have lost their jobs. And I'm guessing that there are going to be some surprises along the way. And I'm not sure where the vast quantities of money required are going to come from to fund a lot of these 5G networks. So, but again, you've already got 5G, you got the Wi-Fi, you got everything else. So, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, that was great, Scottie. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. You're always a wealth of helpful information.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. It was fun being on. Hopefully I said something useful.
Yeah, I think you said a lot that was useful, actually. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to. And be sure to join us again for another episode of Objective Health. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye everybody.
Bye.